The F-35 cockpit is one of the most advanced environments ever created for a fighter pilot, and stepping inside gives you an immediate sense of how the aircraft represents a complete departure from the jets that came before it. Unlike older fighter cockpits filled with dials, analog gauges, and multiple separate displays, the F-35 streamlines nearly everything into a highly digital, touch-driven interface that resembles the cockpit of a futuristic spacecraft as much as it does a traditional combat aircraft. Instead of overwhelming the pilot with countless pieces of information, the layout is designed to reduce cognitive load, presenting critical data in a clear, intuitive way that allows the pilot to focus on the mission rather than fighting the controls. When the canopy closes and the pilot straps in, the environment becomes not just a seat in an aircraft, but more like a command center in the sky, giving one person situational awareness and control that previously would have required an entire team. At the heart of the cockpit is a massive panoramic touchscreen display that stretches across the panel in front of the pilot. Complementing this display is the F-35's helmet-mounted system, which might be its most futuristic feature. Instead of looking down at instruments or even glancing at a heads-up display projected on the windshield, the pilot sees vital information directly in the helmet visor. Speed, altitude, heading, weapons, cues, and even sensor imagery are all projected seamlessly into the visor. What makes this unique is that the helmet is fully integrated with the aircraft's distributed aperture system, which uses multiple cameras mounted around the fuselage. This gives the pilot the ability to essentially look through the aircraft. If the pilot looks down toward the floor, they can see the ground far below, because the cameras feed imagery to the visor. It removes blind spots and creates a kind of augmented reality, enhancing situational awareness in ways no previous cockpit ever could. It means that during low-level flight or while maneuvering around tankers during refueling, the pilot has an unprecedented level of visibility. Takeoff in the F-35 might appear routine at first glance, but the design of the jet and its systems make it a highly controlled and optimized process. The single Pratt & Whitney F-135 engine generates an immense amount of thrust, nearly 43,000 pounds at maximum afterburner, which means the jet has more than enough power to get airborne quickly and confidently. From the cockpit, takeoff involves less manual juggling of controls than in older aircraft. Fly-by-wire technology and automated systems help manage the aircraft's stability, letting the pilot concentrate on situational awareness. The side stick controller and throttle are ergonomically positioned, and almost every function can be handled without the pilot removing their hands. This concept is known as HOTAS, or hands-on, throttle, and stick. And the F-35 takes it to the next level by integrating not just flight control, but communications, sensors, and weapons management into fingertip commands. That integration becomes apparent right from the moment the jet accelerates down the runway, because the workload feels significantly lighter, allowing the pilot to think tactically even while still climbing out. Once airborne. The F-35's performance at low level is one of the areas where its agility and stability come together in impressive fashion. Flying fast at low altitude has always been one of the most demanding tasks for a fighter pilot, because the margin for error is razor thin. In older jets, turbulence, crosswinds, or sudden terrain changes required constant correction. But in the F-35, the advanced flight control system smooths out much of that workload. The aircraft reacts to pilot inputs instantly and with a precision that feels almost effortless. The fly-by-wire system automatically compensates for instability, giving the sensation of a stable ride even in demanding conditions. The design of the wing and body blending, something engineers call a blended wing-body fuselage, also plays a role here. It helps the jet remain both stealthy and aerodynamically efficient, contributing to a flight profile that feels planted even close to the ground at high speed. One of the challenges of low-level flight is navigation, because terrain can obscure radar signals and make visual references more critical. Here again, the F-35 cockpit design pays dividends. The pilot can bring up digital maps directly on the panoramic display, overlaid with GPS and sensor data. The helmet also provides terrain-following cues right in the visor, so the pilot doesn't need to take eyes off the environment. The distributed aperture system further enhances this, letting the pilot see obstacles or potential threats even outside the normal line of sight. For a pilot conducting a low-level ingress toward a target, this fusion of data makes the mission not only safer, but far more effective, because they can fly aggressively while still maintaining situational awareness that would otherwise be impossible. Air refueling is another maneuver that highlights how cockpit design and aircraft handling come together. Mid-air refueling requires precision flying just a few feet from another large aircraft, often at night or in rough weather. The F-35 makes this easier with its stable handling characteristics and the incredible visibility provided by the helmet-mounted display. Pilots can use the helmet to see alignment cues and monitor their position relative to the tanker. The aircraft's responsiveness to small stick and throttle inputs means that the pilot can make minute adjustments smoothly, which reduces the risk of overcorrection. Another advantage is the jet's advanced autopilot modes, which can reduce pilot workload by holding altitude and heading. While the pilot focuses on the delicate positioning needed to connect with the refueling boom or probe, while the maneuver is still demanding. The F-35's cockpit integration makes it less about wrestling the controls and more about calmly guiding the aircraft into position. What also sets the F-35 apart during these phases of flight is a level of sensor fusion happening in the background. In many older fighters, pilots had to interpret raw radar data, cross-check with electronic warfare indicators, then manually correlate that with visual observations. In the F-35, the software does much of that integration automatically. Multiple sources of data radar, infrared, cameras, electronic sensors are fused into a single coherent picture on the panoramic display. The pilot sees not just raw sensor feeds, but an interpreted tactical environment, where threats are, what their ranges are, and how they're moving. It is like having a highly skilled analyst constantly feeding the pilot the most relevant information in real time. During something like air refueling, this might mean highlighting potential aerial threats nearby, so the pilot is never blind to the broader tactical situation. Even while focusing on precision flying, the stealth design of the aircraft also plays into its cockpit experience. The F-35 was engineered from the ground up to minimize radar cross-section with angled surfaces, internal weapons, bays, and radar-absorbent materials. What this means for the pilot is that many missions can be flown closer to hostile defenses with less risk of detection. In turn, the cockpit systems reflect that philosophy by emphasizing situational awareness and threat avoidance. For example, the helmet might cue the pilot to shift course slightly to stay outside an enemy radar cone, or the display might automatically reconfigure to highlight surface-to-air missile sites when flying low-level. The stealth capability isn't just an external feature of the jet. It's deeply integrated into how the pilot flies and how the cockpit presents information. From a design perspective, the F-35 cockpit also emphasizes ergonomics and pilot comfort for long missions. Air refueling often extends missions well beyond the endurance of fuel alone, and pilots can find themselves strapped in for many hours. The seats, controls, and even the pressurization and oxygen systems are optimized to reduce fatigue. Small details, like how the touchscreen can be manipulated, even with gloved hands, or how the helmet custom fits to each pilot, contribute to a sense of the cockpit being an extension of the individual. The result is that the pilot is better able to maintain focus, whether executing demanding low-level maneuvers or lining up with a tanker at night. Performance-wise, the F-35 balances agility with multi-role flexibility. While not as blisteringly fast as some dedicated air superiority fighters, its speed and acceleration are more than sufficient for modern combat scenarios. The thrust from the F-135 engine provides an excellent thrust-to-weight ratio, enabling sharp climbs and quick acceleration when needed for low-level flight. The engine's reliability and responsiveness give pilots the confidence to operate close to terrain at high speeds. During air refueling, throttle response is smooth and predictable, which is essential for making tiny power changes while holding steady alongside a tanker. The combination of raw power, digital flight controls, and cockpit integration results in a platform that feels both forgiving and highly capable. The F-35 also benefits from an unprecedented level of networking capability. Information gathered by one F-35 can be shared instantly with others in the formation or with allied platforms. This means that even during something as routine as a refueling operation, the pilot might be passing along data to other aircraft, enhancing the entire group's situational awareness. The cockpit reflects this by presenting not just the pilot's own sensor picture, but also shared data from the network, again reducing the burden on the individual while enhancing the effectiveness of the team. This networked approach is part of what makes the F-35 not just a fighter, but a force multiplier. Another unique selling point is how much automation supports the pilot without taking away control. For example, the F-35's systems can automatically detect, classify, and prioritize threats, but the pilot always retains the ability to override or adjust responses. This balance means the pilot is never overwhelmed by raw information. but also never feels like they've ceded authority to a machine. The cockpit is designed not to replace human decision-making, but to empower it. And that philosophy becomes most apparent in stressful phases of flight, like low-level maneuvers or delicate air refueling operations. The design of the cockpit also reflects lessons learned from decades of fighter operations. Many older cockpits were criticized for being cluttered or requiring constant head-down time to interpret data. The F-35 solves this by pushing information upward into the helmet, and by allowing pilots to configure displays based on personal preference. A pilot who prefers to keep a large tactical map on the left side and weapon status on the right can do so, while another might emphasize infrared imagery and communications. This flexibility is a key part of what makes the cockpit feel modern and pilot-centered, rather than the systems exist to serve the pilot, not the other way around. When viewed as a complete package, the F-35 cockpit, takeoff performance, low-level handling, and air refueling capabilities illustrate how this aircraft represents a generational leap forward. It's not just about being faster or stealthier than its predecessors, though it is both. It's about creating an environment where a single pilot can manage a mission that would have overwhelmed an entire squadron just a generation ago. The integration of displays, helmet, sensors, and flight controls allows the pilot to act with greater confidence and efficiency, whether climbing into the sky on takeoff, skimming close to the terrain at low level, or delicately approaching a tanker to take on fuel in midair.